Greek myth retellings are having a serious moment at the moment, and so Book Break has come to Greece. Okay, well, from the grey cloudy sky and my shivering, you can tell that's not exactly true, but we are touring around the hidden Greece that you can find in London. And I have 6 amazing books to talk to you about today, all inspired by Greek mythology. So the first book is 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes, and this is a feminist retelling of the Trojan War. It covers everything in the Iliad and beyond, all of the other myths that connect to that story, but all from the women's point of view. Which is so great because women are actually so important in these stories, but they're always just used basically as massively important plot devices, but without ever having a voice or personality of their own. So this is the book that finally changes that. And it's this amazing tapestry of so many different perspectives. So we hear from the Greek women and the Trojan women, the goddesses, muses, even the fates themselves. And it makes the whole world of Greek mythology so much richer, but also so much sadder and more brutal, but ultimately more real. It feels like this kind of behind the scenes look into some of the most famous stories. I only just recently finished this book and I already want to go straight back to the beginning and read it all again because there's so many layers, so many different characters. I just want to learn all of their stories inside out. And I did kick off a massive binge reading of so many different Greek myth retellings. So let's tell you about some of the other ones that I've read. So sticking with the same author for a moment, I'm going to go back to Natalie Haynes' last book, Children of Jocasta, and this one was an Oedipus retelling. So it's told from 2 main timelines. We have Jocasta, who is the woman who in mythology is Oedipus's mother and then later wife, and then we also go to the second timeline a generation later and hear about Jocasta's children, and that bit is told from the perspective of Ismene, the youngest daughter, who doesn't really have a voice in any of the other tellings of this story. And I thought it was really clever what Natalie Haynes did with this story. It takes a very cynical approach to the idea of the oracle and prophecies and a curse set on the city. It's kind of giving other explanations for what really could have happened to make this myth. And it also does change quite a lot of the story, which is fun, so even if you think you know the stories of Oedipus and Antigone really well, there are still surprises in store for you. So I really enjoyed this one. So next I've got 2 Odyssey retellings to talk about. The first one is The Penelopiad by Margaret Atwood. So this is a retelling of the Odyssey all from Penelope's point of view. And so instead of painting Odysseus as the cunning hero that he's always seen as, he is instead basically a manipulative liar, and this book is all about what his very intelligent, very fed up wife got up to in the 20 years while he was away. And it's very experimental, classic Margaret Atwood. Parts of it are told as a play, part of it is told as a lecture examining the significance of the story, so it's very meta, really clever. This was one of the first Greek myth retellings that I ever read, and I absolutely adored it. And then, of course, the book that everyone's been talking about, Circe by Madeline Miller, and this one really does live up to the hype. So Circe in the Odyssey is a witch who turns Odysseus' men into pigs, and who Odysseus lives with on her island for a year as her lover. So Circe only has a fairly small role in the Odyssey, and so Madeline Miller only gives Odysseus a pretty small role back in return. He appears about halfway through this book, by which time we have already completely fallen in love with Circe as this powerful witch, learning her own craft and defying her family. And we see all the connections that Circe has to other myths. So we meet Jason and Medea as they flee from Aeetes, who is her brother. She also helps Daedalus build the cage to keep the Minotaur in, the half-man, half-bull who was born from Circe's sister, Pasiphae. So she's connected to everyone. So it's a really empowering version of the Odyssey, and Penelope does feature in this one as well, and I love what happens with her storyline. So if those were Odyssey retellings, I'm going to finish by going back and talking about some Iliad retellings. And there is one place in London we definitely have to visit for this. So for the Iliad retellings, I have 2 very different versions of this story. 2 different versions of the story about Achilles and Patroclus and the relationship with the slave girl Briseis. And I read them literally back to back, which was quite a jarring experience, but also really fun to look at the very different ways you can interpret Achilles, that most famous best of the Greeks.
He's not that great though.
So the Song of Achilles, this is the first book by Madeline Miller, author of Circe. This is a love story between Achilles and Patroclus. So the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus has been very open to interpretation over the years, but I loved this version of them truly having fallen in love. It's all told from Patroclus' perspective, and we meet these 2 from when they meet as children all the way through the Trojan War, and crucially, the relationship with Briseis and the massive impact that that has on the war. And then there's Silence of the Girls, which is a much more brutal read. And in this one, Achilles and Patroclus don't have a traditional romantic relationship, though they do have an amazing connection. But this time, the story is told mainly from the perspective of Briseis, who is a slave girl who was captured and traded around in the war camp, so it's very hard to read about. And Achilles isn't always a likeable character anyway. Even in Song of Achilles, I loved him because Patroclus loved him, but he's very flawed. But in Silence of the Girls, you suddenly hate him for a lot of it, though there are parts told from his perspective to kind of balance that out. And one of my favourite things about this story is how Pat Barker wrote the soldiers as so recognisable as modern men. So she used a range of different British regional slang to reflect the fact that there would have been so many different dialects from all the Greek cities, and they sing drinking chants, and they just felt so real, which is sometimes a barrier when you're reading ancient stories to actually be able to relate to the characters, but Pat Barker did that really well. And the same for the women. The way that the women in the camp spoke to each other and laughed with each other about their experiences felt so familiar. So what are your favourite Greek myth retellings? Do leave me a comment, because I'm absolutely loving this trend. I love trying to figure out where the myths might have been based in truth, and also thanks to feminist retellings like this, actually finally getting to imagine what the lives of women might have been like in those times. So comment below with your favourites, or just leave us a Greek flag emoji, and of course do give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and hit that subscribe button below for new videos every Thursday. And in the meantime, you can always go over and follow us on Instagram at BookBreakUK. Coming up next week on Book Break, we've got Jean back. She's going to tell us all about her favourite classic sci-fi books. See you next time.